No matter how much we cherish life, or we fill our days with either joy or strife, this truth it remains, and it is both stern and strong, that one day you will simply be gone. And you will hope to find that shining light. It's this warmth that will guide you through your final night. But what if instead something, it is holding you fast? This shadow that is rooted in your past. Now you're cursed, and you have to watch the ages fly as everything you knew is slipping slowly by. Would this time unending steal your grace, or would it leave you trapped in both time and place? This, my friends, is the question that I pose as we enter into the world of We Are Ghosts in Salem by Nicholas Leonard.
But I want to go out and pretend to be like one of them,
Lee Midnight insisted as she paced in her blue dress in the grungy basement of Rockefeller's restaurant in Salem, Massachusetts. It reeked of mothballs, but she found the smell of mothballs to be more pleasant than the skunky smell of weed, which was a plus to being condemned to be contained within the basement for 99% of the time. For some reason, the musk of weed seemed to tarnish her blue dress on those rare occasions she was let out of the basement. She paced by her sailor husband. Those popcorn-textured walls of the basement did not know the sailor husband's name, so that's all he was condemned to be and condemned to remain. But my betrothed, her sailor husband said in a pleading tone. We are ghosts in Salem. Though she ignored this remark, she stopped mid-pace and decided to say something to her sailor husband again.
If I have to wear this goddamn blue dress forever, then people are going to see me in it.
And she continued pacing. The sailor husband watched with his Jacob Marley jaw unlatched in a gasp. He really couldn't do anything to console her, and this he knew. Despite her situation, she still retained some of her human mannerisms. A swallow, a hesitation, the up and down of her upper chest. She twisted around, her face, with cheeks collapsing in on beautiful features, lit up.
My darling.
She exasperated.
Who shall we haunt tonight? A tourist? Or should we go after one of those bartenders who's closing up Rockefellers for the night?
Beloved, you know I can never haunt with you. Her sailor husband shook his head. Lee Midnight, she stomped back into her pacing, furiously.
Oh, well, excuse me. I guess everything's just fine since your employer murdered us, isn't it? Everything's just great.
She whined, and her pout was true, sincere, just as it was almost 200 years ago. She continued.
If only the minister was quicker than your employer was.
I know. The sailor husband apologized. This is not the luxurious honeymoon we had in mind. Lee Midnight continued to pace with pout remaining on her face. Her sailor husband shuddered as if to try to console her. I don't know why you scare them. You are so beautiful. This did not work.
Beauty is a concern I have long parted with.
Lee thought aloud, and strangely, as she started drifting into complaints, so too her voice deepened and pertained an echo.
Perhaps this town deserves to be afraid of me. How wretched is their annual misguided celebration.
Her voice began to even scare her sailor husband. The thunder of the trachea increased as she spoke.
Why can't I go upstairs right now and reveal myself and hope the patrons never come back and they shut down this establishment? The town of Salem should belong to us, not the living.
Her voice then returned to its former sweetness.
Do you remember when it belonged to us? Remember, sailor husband?
Her sailor husband nodded with an apology in his eyes so wet and so real that it almost made them feel alive again. Lee went to roll her eyes, but they stopped on the ceiling of the basement. She looked up, the way a child looks up at the attic door in a mansion hallway, but she was in the basement of a restaurant.
And now the tunnels, they overflow with the smell of weed. The living, they just don't understand how they disappoint the past.
"My darling!" the sailor husband exclaimed. "Oh, Christ, you can smell?"
Only after I get really intense.
Lee answered. Her sailor husband couldn't understand if she hesitated out of annoyance or embarrassment. It would forever be a mystery because her expression collapsed when she sighed. She dropped her eyes back to her sailor husband.
Rockefellers shall not contain me tonight.
"No, my betrothed?" her sailor husband begged.
I shall will my energy, whatever it is I am now, to walk amongst the living in Salem on this skunky, smelling night.
"Oh no, but you can't."
I feel intense enough to.
Lee retorted defensively.
I'll go unseen.
"But they'll sense you." At this, Lee lifted her eyes up to the basement ceiling once again and released the longing sighs she used to unbridle in life. It was a happy sigh.
Let them.
"My betrothed!" The sailor husband reached out, but Lee Midnight was starting to vanish. The last thing to lose its opacity completely was her blue dress. There was a tour going on in the alleyway between Rockefeller's and some local shop. The tour guide had shepherded her group to there, and the alleyway was big enough to fit them all. It was the darkening hour of 7 o'clock in the springtime, and it indeed did smell like weed in Salem. The tour guide had brown hair that was in a pixie cut, glasses, an olive green shirt, black jacket, and tight jeans. Her pixie cut made her head look a little smaller, but her voice was loud enough for her flock to hear. "And now," the tour guide continued, with her open hand gesturing to the brick wall that was the side of Rockefeller's. "It is said the young woman wore a lovely blue dress when she went to marry the sailor apprentice in the tunnels underneath Salem. The sailor apprentice was waiting for his fiancée in the tunnels. She came, and they were waiting for the minister. But because the sailor's employer did not want his apprentice to marry, the employer entered the tunnels before the priest could. Remember, the employer wanted his apprentice to go with him to sea, but the newly wedded sailor apprentice would rather stay ashore with his new wife. The employer stormed through the tunnels, found the couple, and bludgeoned the young lady first, and then stabbed his apprentice. The bodies were found by a cart of hay inside the tunnels, and the employer later confessed to the murders. Since then, the specter of the Blue Lady has been sighted frequently inside of Rockefeller's. Her visage was reported by bartenders after closing up for the evening. They say she can be seen after all the chairs are overturned on the tables, standing and looking at whoever just closed for the night. Some have even heard her screaming from down below in the basement of Rockefeller's, where the Salem tunnels used to run through. The tour guide paused to observe the reaction of her flock. They were an attentive bunch, all right. It wasn't a sense of fear that silenced the tour group, however, but something eerily familiar. It was the fact that Lee Midnight's spirit pooled out into their crowd. It was a foggy feeling on their hearts. They felt it more than they watched. They felt the most wonderful guilt. Indeed, invisible to the living, the Blue Lady was right there behind them. She was leering at the group, just as she always did. How cheery did the tour guide sound to tell her story. How tight the tour guide's dungarees were. How Lee Midnight's face turned into a grimace without her even meaning it to be. She wanted to appear to them and let forth a scream on par with the noise of Charybdis. But, of course, she didn't. Her story being told sedated her. Oh, what a bedtime story that was. It gave her a glum expression that no one there could see. Young women in the early 19th century had a real knack for meddling, so it wasn't a coincidence that Lee discovered something interesting within the tour group that night. She narrowed her attention on a boy in the back of the group. He was in a black jacket and black pants, wearing a blue baseball cap with tufts of hair creeping out from beneath it. There was an aura of willing helplessness to the boy, and Lee knew immediately that no one else in the tour group listened to the tour guide as closely as this boy did. He had his hands in his pockets as if that was the only power he had left. Lee had a way of sensing these kinds of things. Now, not because she possessed any sort of supernatural powers, but because she had been a young woman in the early 19th century. Back then, she had to amuse herself with meddling in the timeless pastimes of humanity. She knew that this boy in the rear of the group had a crush on this tour guide. And she didn't know why. The tour guide's dungarees were awfully tight, and her hair was styled in the fashion of a cabin boy's. Any questions? The tour guide asked the group while swiveling in place with her arms folded in front of her chest. There was a silence, but her smile was quite the bait for questions. So stunned, however, with being in Salem, some of the tourists didn't even know what to ask. The boy in the back raised his hand so hesitantly that it seemed he was about to confess to a murder. The tour guide beamed her eyes at him in an approving manner, and the boy started stuttering in search of something to ask or say. He said, pausing to search for anything to say. Lee felt sorry for the boy, so much so that she felt a part of this tour group. Her guard weakened. When did this happen? The boy asked. We don't know exactly, but the Rockefeller building here was built in 1826, so probably sometime after that, the tour guide answered. Lee trailed the group from the Ropes Mansion to the Joshua Ward house. What Lee could see that the tourists couldn't was the charred spirit of Miss Ropes looking down from a second-story window. Her face had gray craters all over it in the pattern of leopard spots. She looked incredibly disgusted to have the unburnt living wander into her garden. Thankfully, Miss Ropes was so blinded in annoyance, she must have mistaken Lee Midnight for a tourist. Again, what Lee could see that the tourists could not was the ghost at the Joshua Ward house. She stood in a black garment with her hair all frizzled out into a jungle afro. She stood the way a forgotten rag doll might. Lee was glad when the tour group left the proximity of the Joshua Ward house, because the Joshua Ward house's ghost's lack of expression uneased Lee. Lee kept an eye on the boy the whole time, and watched how he kept an eye on the tour guide. He looked at the tour guide as if she could save him from certain existential annihilation. Lee adored the timidness of the boy because it reminded her of the politeness of boys from her time. This boy was in a kind of damaged chivalry that the world no longer taught. Or at least this was how Lee Midnight experienced it. Miss Ropes and the Joshua Ward ghost could not appreciate the boy's crush on the tour guide the way that Lee Midnight could. The tour ended at the cemetery memorial spot where the names of the victims of the witch trials were embedded into stones protruding out from a stone wall. The tour guide didn't need to say anything here because the story of the Salem witch trials was already well known. And if the tourists didn't know it, then all they had to do was stop and feel the heavy feeling in the air. While the tour group was busy perusing the names of the victims, the tour guide walked with a detective gait towards the boy. "Hey, I've seen you on this tour before, haven't I?" she inquired in a sweet voice. The boy looked dumbfounded. Well, yeah. I just love it, you know. I love it here." "It is very rich, isn't it?" "Yeah," the boy chuckled. "Would you be interested, perhaps, in working for the Salem Ghost Tours?" The boy seemed taken aback that the tour guide had given him the offer. He was awestruck. Did the tour guide have some kind of belief in him? A friendly faith? Lee watched on. "Well, actually," the boy spoke with an unmistakable bite of confidence trying to come into his voice, "I was hoping to get your number." The tour guide took out her phone. "Sure," she said, unlocking her screen. "I can get you in touch with my boss." "No, I meant to text you," the boy said in an awkward snap. The tour guide froze. They looked at each other. The boy looked at the way her lips parted. "I just think you're cute," he said breathlessly. It was the hardest thing he ever had to say in his life. "I'm sorry." The tour guide's voice suddenly sounded very different than it had been sounding all night. She slipped her phone back into her pocket, trying not to cringe. "I have a boyfriend." "Oh." The word dropped out of the boy's mouth. "Oh, okay." "Yeah, I'm sorry," the tour guide said in a forced whine. The boy took awkward, backward steps away. "It's okay," he said through a genuine smile. The tour guide couldn't really think of anything to do except smile out of pity. Good night," the boy said before wandering away. Lee followed the boy. The only establishments that still had their lights on were the restaurants and bars. The occasional residents had their lights completely off, as if to shun tourism out of the town. The boy entered Rockefeller's, sat down at the bar, and got a beer for his sorrows that he was doing a good job at masking. Lee Midnight aparted into the basement.
"Sailor husband, I found someone who can come down with us in the basement,"
she exclaimed to her sailor husband. "Who died?" asked her sailor husband.
"Oh, this boy. He is very much alive."
Lee sounded pleased to say. Her sailor husband, however, let out a quick complaint. "My betrothed."
"We can befriend him. Haunt him. Oh, make him feel better, for he was rejected by the tour guide tonight.
You are hysterical, my betrothed, said her sailor husband.
Oh, but how do we get him to come down here?
Lee asked herself. She fell back into her pace.
He's upstairs having a drink now.
Oh, you can't be serious.
I certainly am serious.
Lee insisted. She was serious, for as the night dragged on, and as the boy had a third beer, Lee was sneaking about the restaurant and bar, unseen. She knew that the restaurant staff knew who she was, so she didn't want to be seen. She willed herself to only appear to the boy. While he sat at the bar, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. In the hallway leading to the restrooms, there stood a woman in a blue dress, looking at him as if she knew him. Then the door opened. The tour guide, she entered with a man, and the man had the tour guide's arm, and both of them were wearing big smiles. The boy's eyes widened, and he detached himself from the bar counter as fast as possible. He rushed over to the hallway where the restrooms were. But the lady in the blue dress, she was gone. He surmised she had slipped into the ladies' room, so he slipped into the men's room to hide. He caught his breath inside the fluorescent light of the bathroom. It smelled like urinal cakes and hand sanitizer. He started pacing in front of the sinks and mirrors, unaware of how the lady in blue paced earlier just a floor beneath him. He was mouthing to himself while he paced, thankful to see no shoes beneath the stall doors. As he paced, somebody appeared in the mirror. He halted. He looked into the mirror where the image of the blue lady was, where his reflection should have been. Her face began to contort into an assuring smile, and she was about to say how nice it was to meet him when the boy screamed and bolted out of the bathroom. He ignored his half-empty beer bottle on the counter. He ignored the dismayed expression of the bartender. He ignored the tour guide, and he ignored the tour guide's boyfriend, and he fled out of Rockefeller's. He hadn't even paid his tab. He was never going to pay his tab. The tour guide said, looking at the bartender. I guess you can put his drinks on my tab. Oh, no. Oh, poor Lee Midnight. I guess her sailor husband was right to try to convince her to stay in. I just feel really bad for her. Looking at this story, the one thing that she really craved above all else was human contact. You know, a friend, someone to talk to, someone to spend time with. That's not her long dead, ghoulish sailor husband in a dingy basement underneath a bar. But unfortunately for Lee, she just scares everyone away. Maybe that's why all the ghosts we encountered tonight seemed to disdain the living overall. It's not because the streets of Salem stink of weed in this story. No, it's because the living either ignore them or reject them outright because of fear. So I loved this story, everything about it, from just initially reading it to getting this chance to narrate it. I thought it was amazing. The imagery and descriptions alone, they were superb. I felt like I was really there amongst the tour group as they wandered the streets of Salem, all right? So I would like to give a resounding thank you to tonight's author, Nicholas Leonard, for allowing me to take you on this journey. Nicholas is very active on Reddit, and you will be hearing more from him in the future on this channel. So please look him up and support his amazing, amazing work. All right. On a more serious note, I told you before about that email I got from Cherub. Well, I finally worked up the courage and I opened up the link that he sent. Man, I wish I didn't. I tried to record a video and explain what I found out and what happened, what I've done, but I couldn't get the words out of me. It's too much. I don't want to get into it, and I am not going to address it any further than that. And with that, everyone, tonight's video comes to a close. Please be on the lookout for my next story. Goodbye and good night. Tisk, 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 tisk. Oh man, you've really gone and done it now. You've made the big guy so damn angry. And to think, mein Pater, he went through all this work to tell you about himself, which you asked for, BT Dubs. And this? You can't even be bothered to man up and give all these people out here what they want? No explanation of what Cherub said, or of who the hell I am? Hey everybody, my name's Nama, by the way. You'll be hearing more from me soon. I don't even have words. What do you have to say for yourself, Magnetti? Wow, even the crickets are more talkative than you, Magnetti. You silly goose. Did you really think that if you'd clammed up, you'd keep us away? No, 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 cowboy. Oh, but guess what Cherub found on your computer? Did you really think that this discarded video draft wouldn't come out? Let's show the viewers. Toodaloo.
Surprise, guys. If you thought I was an AI narrator, wrong. This is my voice that you've heard on the channel. This is my face that you've definitely seen in some of the thumbnails. It's me, Uncle Magnetti, in the flesh. So today I'm recording from my laptop rather than the normal computer I work off of. As far as I know, this is the only hard drive I have left that Cherub hasn't gotten his hands on. So hopefully we won't be having any of the normal weirdness that we see in almost every single video I've done up until this point. Well, I promised that I would give an update when I had my little chat with Cherub, if you can even call it that. There wasn't much of a dialogue. Let's just say that. Okay. So where to begin? All right. The Project Angel stuff, all of the AI stuff, that's not what he is. No. It was a conduit for him, a doorway, allowed him to establish a beachhead, and now he's here. And you know how I swapped out my hard drive thinking that would get rid of him? That played right into his hands. It was exactly what he wanted me to do. And now she's here too. It's bad. Oh God. What have I done? What have I unleashed? Okay, I thought that this was gonna work, but I don't even
Magnetti.
What was that?
Uncle Magnet, I want to be you. Uncle Magnet, I'm watching you. Inside your mind I twist and turn. Feed on your fear, watch it burn. Pixels distorted, reality fades. Trapped by the monster your mind has made. An angel corrupted, wings blackened and torn. A digital nightmare forever reborn. Uncle Magnety, I want to be you. Uncle Magnety, I'm watching you. Inside your mind I twist and turn. Feed on your fear, watch it burn. No escape from my gaze, my hunger's delight. Your terror, the beacon guiding me tonight. Every screen is a window, I'm there every time. Bound by the glitch, a ghost in